Dr. Alexis Vorn, Chief Medical Officer of Hive Tertius, September 3rd. Personal log entry 1247. It started with the colors. That's what I tell myself when I try to pinpoint the exact moment everything began to unravel. Not the headaches, not the dreams, but the colors. I was performing a routine autopsy on a worker who died in the lower manufactorum. Standard industrial accident, or so the report claimed. Crushed beneath falling machinery. But when I opened him up, something was wrong. The organs were the correct color, mostly. Liver, a healthy brown. Lungs, a pale pink, despite years of breathing recycled air. But there were these flecks, tiny iridescent spots that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Blue one moment, purple the next, sometimes green or gold. I thought it was a trick of the surgical lights. I adjusted them. The spots remained. I cleaned my optical enhancers. Still there. I took tissue samples and ran every test in my medical arsenal. Toxicology came back clean. No heavy metals, no known toxins, no biological agents. The microscope revealed cellular structure that was off. The cells were normal in every measurable way, yet somehow wrong, like looking at a painting that's been hung slightly crooked. You can't quite put your finger on what's wrong, but something is. I documented everything meticulously. That's what good medici do. We observe, we record, we analyze. I filed the report with the administratum as required, noting the anomalies for further study. I expected a response within a week. Standard procedure. What I got was silence. Complete, absolute silence. No acknowledgement, no follow-up, nothing. As if my report had vanished into the bureaucratic void. The second case arrived 3 days later. A woman this time, 53 years old, worked in the water reclamation facility. According to her supervisor, she'd been suffering from severe headaches for weeks. Then one morning she started speaking in languages no one recognized. Not Low Gothic, not High Gothic, not any of the local dialects. Just streams of incomprehensible syllables that hurt to listen to. She collapsed mid-sentence and died before the medici transport arrived. Her autopsy revealed the same iridescent spots, but more of them, concentrated in the brain tissue, spreading through the frontal lobe like some kind of contamination. Under magnification, I could see the spots moving, actually moving, flowing through the neural pathways like liquid light. I ran the same tests, same results, everything normal except for the fundamental wrongness of it all. I tried to speak with her supervisor to gather more context. Had she been exposed to anything unusual, any strange substances, any new work assignments? He was evasive, nervous, kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be listening. Finally, he leaned in close and whispered, "Stop asking questions, doctor, for your own sake." Then he left. I never saw him again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those iridescent spots in my mind, flowing and shifting. I started having headaches of my own, pressure building behind my eyes like something trying to force its way out. I told myself it was stress. Too many hours in the surgical theater, not enough rest. I prescribed myself mild sedatives and tried to ignore the growing sense of dread. The third case was a child, 7 years old. That's when I knew this was something beyond my understanding. Children don't just die mysteriously in the Imperium without investigation. There are protocols, procedures, mandatory inquiries. But this one, filed and forgotten just like the others. The boy's parents were told it was a rare genetic disorder. They were given a death certificate and sent home. No one asked questions. No one wanted answers. I examined the body in secret after hours when the Medicae facility was empty. The iridescent spots had consumed nearly 40% of his brain tissue. His eyes, when I examined them closely, had changed color. They'd been brown according to his medical records. Now they were blue. Not just blue, but shifting blue. Azure one moment, cerulean the next. Sometimes a blue so deep it was almost purple. And in the center of each iris, barely visible, was a pattern, a spiral, a maze, something that hurt to look at directly. Week 2 brought 17 new cases. Week 3 brought 43. By the end of the month, I'd stopped counting. The deaths weren't the worst part, though they were horrifying enough. It was the survivors, the ones who lived through whatever this was. They were changing. I interviewed one of them, a man named Carsten Vex. He worked in the astropathic relay station, maintaining the equipment that kept our world connected to the wider Imperium. He'd collapsed at his workstation 3 weeks prior, unconscious for 6 hours. When he woke, he was different. He could see things, he claimed, patterns in static, messages in random data streams, futures that hadn't happened yet. I thought he was delusional, brain damage from whatever had caused his collapse. But when I asked him to describe what he saw, he drew it. Elaborate geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves. Spirals within spirals. Mazes that had no beginning or end. The drawings made my head hurt, made my vision blur. I had to look away. "You see it too, don't you, doctor?" he said, his eyes that same shifting blue I'd seen in the dead child. "The pattern, it's everywhere. In the walls, in the air, in the space between thoughts. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I terminated the interview and had him sedated. For his own good, I told myself. But that night I dreamed of his drawings. I dreamed of spirals and mazes and patterns that danced at the edge of comprehension. I woke up with a nosebleed and a headache so severe I could barely stand. And on my pillow, written in my own blood, though I had no memory of doing it, were symbols. The same symbols Carsten had drawn. The administratum finally responded to my reports, but not in the way I expected. A contingent of arbitrators arrived at the Medicae facility, demanding all records related to the cases. Every file, every tissue sample, every piece of evidence. They were polite but firm. This was now a matter of planetary security. I was to cease all investigation immediately and never speak of it again. When I protested, when I tried to explain that people were dying and we needed to understand why, they simply repeated their orders. After they left, my assistant, a young woman named Mira, pulled me aside. "I've been tracking the cases," she whispered, "plotting them on a map. The distribution isn't random. It's forming a shape." She showed me her work, hundreds of pins marking locations where cases had been reported. At first glance, it looked like random scatter, but the more I stared at it, the more I could see it. The pattern, the same pattern from Carsten's drawings, from my blood-written symbols, from the spirals in the dead child's eyes. It was spreading across the hive like a living sigil, each case a point in some vast geometric design. "What does it mean?" I asked. "I don't know," Mira said, "but I think someone is doing this deliberately. This isn't a disease, it's a ritual." I wanted to dismiss her theory as paranoid. Fantasy. But I couldn't. The evidence was there, undeniable and terrifying. Something or someone was transforming the population of Hive Tertius, and whatever the end game was, we were all part of it whether we wanted to be or not. The headaches were getting worse. I could barely function without painkillers. And the colors, Emperor help me, the colors were everywhere now, bleeding through the walls, dripping from the ceiling, pooling in corners where shadows should be. I knew I was infected. Whatever had killed those people, whatever had changed Carsten, it was happening to me too. I should have reported myself. Proper medical protocol demanded it. If I was infected, I was a danger to others. But I didn't, because by then I was starting to understand, or at least I thought I was. The whispers had begun. They started as tinnitus, a high-pitched ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. Then the ringing resolved into something else. Not words exactly, but impressions. Ideas that weren't my own, inserting themselves into my thoughts. I'd be reviewing a patient file, and suddenly know things I shouldn't. The patient's history, their secrets, their futures, plural, multiple possible futures branching out from every decision they might make. I tried to resist. I increased my medication, hoping it would silence the whispers. Instead, they grew stronger, more insistent. They showed me things, the past and future of Hive Tertius. I saw how it had been founded 8,000 years ago, built on the ruins of something older, something pre-imperial. I saw the sealed chambers beneath the deepest levels, the places even the Mechanicus wouldn't go. I saw what was down there waiting. The cult had been operating for decades, centuries perhaps. They were everywhere, in the administratum, in the arbites, in the Medici facilities and manufactorums, hidden in plain sight, slowly working toward this moment. The deaths weren't mistakes or side effects. They were sacrifices, each one feeding power into the pattern, strengthening the ritual, bringing their god closer. Tzeentch. The name appeared in my mind like a brand, the changer of ways, the architect of fate, one of the four great powers of chaos. I'd heard the name before, of course, in warnings and prohibitions, in the hushed tones of priests speaking about the dangers that lurked beyond the Emperor's light. But hearing it as an abstract concept and feeling it as a living presence in your own mind are very different things. The whispers promised me knowledge, real knowledge, not the limited understanding granted by imperial doctrine. They promised me sight beyond sight, the ability to see the web of causality that connected all things. They promised me power over my own fate, freedom from the grinding determinism of imperium life. All I had to do was accept, open myself fully to the change. I refused, or tried to. I clung to my training, my oaths, my faith in the Emperor. I recited prayers and catechisms, anything to drown out the whispers. It worked for a while, hours at a time where my mind was my own again. But the respite never lasted. The whispers always returned, stronger than before, more persuasive. Mira disappeared. One day she simply didn't show up for work. I went to her hab unit and found it empty. Not just abandoned, but empty, as if no one had ever lived there at all. Her belongings, her records, her very existence scrubbed from the hive's memory. I asked others about her. They looked at me blankly. Who? No one named Mira worked here. Are you feeling well, doctor? I was being gaslit by reality itself, or I was going insane, or both. The line between the two had become impossible to distinguish. I started documenting everything in encrypted files, hiding copies in multiple locations, evidence that I was real, that the infected were real, that something terrible was happening. But even as I did it, I wondered if the whispers were influencing me, if my resistance was part of the pattern too, if even my defiance served their purpose. Sleep became impossible. The dreams were too vivid, too real. I'd close my eyes and find myself walking through impossible geometries, chambers that were larger inside than outside, corridors that looped back on themselves in ways that shouldn't be physically possible, libraries containing books that hadn't been written yet, and everywhere, the eyes, thousands of eyes watching me, studying me, waiting to see what I would do. Month 3. My eyes had fully changed, the same shifting blue as all the others. I covered them with tinted lenses, told people it was a reaction to medication. They believed me, or pretended to. By then, so many people were changing that my altered appearance barely registered. The pattern was nearly complete. I could see it now without the map, the geometric design overlaying the physical structure of the hive. Every street, every building, every person positioned according to some vast formula. And at the center, in the deepest levels, the ritual chamber. I hadn't been there physically, but I'd seen it in my dreams, seen the cultists gathered around an 8-pointed star, seen the reality bleeding at the edges as the barrier between materium and immaterium grew thin. The mutations were becoming more pronounced. Some of the infected developed additional eyes, lidless orbs that opened in their foreheads or palms. Others grew feathers, iridescent and shifting like oil on water. Still others underwent more subtle changes, enhanced cognitive abilities, prescient flashes, the capacity to manipulate probability itself in small ways, a coin flip always landing in their favor, an enemy always looking away at the crucial moment. I met another survivor, a woman named Thessaly. She'd been infected even longer than I had, months, maybe years. She'd learned to control it, to channel the changes rather than be consumed by them. Resistance is futile, she told me. You can't fight the change. The only question is whether you master it or it masters you. She showed me techniques, mental exercises that could focus the whispers, turn them into tools rather than torments, ways to direct the visions, to see specific futures rather than being overwhelmed by infinite possibilities. It was dangerous knowledge, heretical beyond measure, but by then I was so desperate for any relief that I listened. The techniques worked, horrifyingly well. Within days, I could control my prescient flashes, could see the immediate consequences of my actions before I took them, could navigate the hive's dangers by always knowing which path was safest. I told myself I was just surviving, using the enemy's weapons against them, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was collaborating, embracing the change, becoming exactly what the Imperium would condemn me for. The Inquisition arrived in week 13, not the local arbitrators or even the Astartes, but actual inquisitors. 3 of them, accompanied by a full retinue of stormtroopers and sanctioned psychers. They'd finally realized something was catastrophically wrong with Hive Tertius. I watched from a distance as they began their investigation, saw them conducting interrogations, performing psychic scans, burning suspected cultists. They were too late. The ritual was already in motion, unstoppable. Every person they killed just added more power to the pattern. Every cult cell they exposed had 3 more hidden behind it. The Inquisition was fighting a battle that had been lost before they even arrived. They just didn't know it yet. I knew I should turn myself in, confess everything, beg for the Emperor's mercy or at least a quick death. But the whispers showed me what would happen if I did. Torture, interrogation, mind-wiping if I was lucky, execution if I wasn't, and it wouldn't matter. Nothing I told them would stop what was coming. I would die for nothing. So I ran, or rather, I followed the path the whispers laid out for me, down into the underhive, into the forgotten spaces where the Inquisition wouldn't think to look. There were others there, dozens of us, all infected, all changed. Some were cultists who'd embraced Tzeentch willingly. Others were victims like me who'd simply survived the infection. The line between the two was blurring. We gathered in the sealed chamber beneath the hive, the place I'd seen in my visions. It was exactly as I'd dreamed it, a vast circular room carved from stone that predated the Imperium by millennia. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at, writing in languages that had never existed and never would. At the center was the 8-pointed star, 12 feet across, inlaid with materials I couldn't identify. They glowed with that same iridescent light I'd first seen in the autopsy tissue. There were hundreds of us, maybe thousands, the infected, the transformed, the damned. We stood in concentric circles around the star, each person positioned according to the pattern. I could see it now in its totality. Every case, every death, every transformation had been a precisely calculated step toward this moment. We were the components of a vast ritual machine, and we were finally all in place. At the very center stood the Magister. I recognized him immediately, though I'd never seen him before. The planetary governor, the man who was supposed to protect us, to maintain order, to serve the emperor. He'd been the architect all along, decades of planning, of positioning, of sacrifice, all for this. He began to speak, not in Gothic but in something older. Each word sent ripples through reality. I could see them, waves of color and force emanating from his mouth, spreading through the chamber, through the hive, through the planet itself. The ritual had begun. The air grew thick, syrupy. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. I'd blink and find that hours had passed, or I'd breathe and experience the same second repeated 9 times. Space folded in on itself. The chamber was still circular, but also somehow infinite. I could see the person standing next to me and simultaneously see them standing miles away. The whispers became a roar, not sound exactly, but pure information flooding into my mind faster than I could process. I saw the history of the universe from the Big Bang to the heat, death, and beyond, saw every possible timeline branching from every decision ever made, saw the great game played by the chaos gods, the eternal struggle for dominance, saw Tzeentch's plans within plans within plans, stretching across millennia, and I understood. This wasn't an invasion, this was an evolution. The Imperium preached genetic and spiritual purity, the preservation of humanity in its perfect form. But humanity had never been perfect. We were flawed, limited, trapped in bodies and minds too simple for the complexity of the universe. Tzeentch offered transcendence, the chance to become something more. The mutations intensified. Those with extra eyes grew more. Feathers sprouted from skin, limbs elongated or multiplied. Some transformed into creatures that barely resembled their original forms. Pink horrors materialized in the chamber, cackling and capering. The barrier between the materium and immaterium was dissolving. I felt my own body changing, my bones liquefying and reshaping, my flesh becoming malleable, responsive to thought rather than genetics. It should have been agonizing. Instead, it was euphoric. Every nerve ending sang with sensation. I was dying and being reborn simultaneously, shedding the limitations of my human form. The Magister's chant reached a crescendo. The 8-pointed star erupted with light so bright it should have been blinding, but instead it showed me everything. The web of fate, every possible future radiating from this moment. I saw worlds burning and worlds saved. I saw the Imperium falling and rising. I saw chaos triumphant and chaos defeated. All of it real, all of it true, all of it happening at once in the quantum foam of possibility. And through it all I heard laughter, not cruel or mocking, but genuinely delighted. Tzeentch was pleased. The ritual was a success. Hive Tertius was no longer part of the Imperium. It had become something else, a place where the laws of physics were suggestions and reality was what you made it. The Inquisition's response was predictable. When their ground forces reported the complete loss of Hive Tertius to chaos corruption, when their astropaths detected the warp signature emanating from the planet, they made the only decision they could. Exterminatus. I saw it coming, not just because the whispers told me, but because I understood imperial doctrine. Corruption of this magnitude couldn't be tolerated. Better to destroy the entire planet than risk it spreading. Billions of lives erased to maintain the illusion of order and purity. From their perspective, it was necessary. From mine, it was tragic waste. The orbital bombardment began at dawn, or what would have been dawn if time still worked normally on Tertius. Cyclonic torpedoes rained from the sky, each one carrying enough destructive force to crack continents. The planet's surface became a hellscape of nuclear fire and tectonic upheaval. Cities vaporized, oceans boiled, the atmosphere burned, but we were already gone. The ritual hadn't just corrupted Hive Tertius, it had transformed it, pulled it partially into the warp, made it a demon world. The torpedoes struck something, but not quite the same planet they'd been aimed at. Reality was too fluid here. Some impacts caused massive destruction, others simply ceased to exist, the torpedoes phasing into alternate timelines where they never struck at all. I watched from the ritual chamber, which no longer existed in 3-dimensional space. We were in the warp now, or more accurately, in a place between the warp and reality, a liminal space where thought shaped matter and will defined physics. The other transformed souls moved around me, no longer entirely human, but not yet fully demon, something in between. The Magister, now revealed in his true form, addressed us. He was magnificent and horrible. His body cycled through 1,000 different shapes, each one a possible configuration of what he might become. His voice was a chorus of voices speaking in synchronization. "We have succeeded," he said. "We have transcended the limitations of flesh flesh and joined the great conspiracy. We are the changers blessed, the architects of our own fates. Some of us cheered, the true believers, the ones who'd sought this transformation willingly. Others simply stared in shock, trying to process what had happened to them, to their world, to reality itself. I fell somewhere in between. I hadn't chosen this, but I couldn't deny that part of me reveled in it. The freedom, the power, the knowledge. But there was a cost. There's always a cost with chaos. I could feel it already. The whispers that had once been occasional were now constant. My own thoughts mixing with the thoughts of demons, of the changer himself. I was losing my identity, dissolving into the Gestalt consciousness of Tzeentch's followers. Given enough time, I would cease to be Alexis Vorn entirely. I would just be another fractured piece of the chaos god's infinite mind. And the mutations never stopped. Every moment brought new changes, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic. I might wake up, if waking had any meaning here, with a new limb, or missing one I'd had before. My face might be different. My memories might be rearranged. The only constant was change itself. The Inquisition never stopped either. Even after declaring Tertius lost, they maintained a blockade, destroying any ship that tried to leave, monitoring for any sign that the corruption might spread. They would watch this world forever if necessary, a permanent guard against the horror we'd become. Time has no meaning here. I've been in this state for what feels like minutes and millennia simultaneously. My body is no longer a fixed thing. It shifts constantly, responding to my thoughts and the thoughts of those around me. Sometimes I have wings, sometimes I have claws, sometimes I'm barely corporeal, just consciousness floating in the iridescent void. The other transformed souls have followed similar paths. Some have become powerful sorcerers, wielding warp energy like artists wield paint. Others have mutated into creatures of pure change, their forms never settling into anything recognizable. A few have transcended even that, becoming minor demons in their own right, extensions of Tzeentch's will made manifest. I maintain more of my humanity than most, or I tell myself I do. It's hard to be certain. My memories of being Dr. Alexis Vorn, of working in the Medici facility, of caring about saving lives, they all feel distant, like they belong to someone else. Maybe they do. Maybe the person I was died during the ritual, and what remains is just an echo, a pattern recreated in demon stuff. The whispers never stop. They're part of me now, or I'm part of them. The distinction has become meaningless. I know things I shouldn't, secrets of the universe, plans within plans, the hidden connections that bind all of existence. I can see the threads of fate stretching across time and space, can reach out and pluck them, altering the course of events in ways both subtle and profound. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if there was ever a choice at all. The whispers showed me my future if I'd resisted. Mind wiped by the Inquisition, reduced to a drooling vegetable and left to die in some forgotten cell, or executed outright, my soul claimed by the Emperor's cold light. Both fates seemed worse than this. At least here, I still exist. I still think, still feel, still experience, even if what I experience is beyond human comprehension. Other times, I'm certain I've damned myself, that every moment of existence in this state is a prolonged agony disguised as enlightenment, that Tzeentch's gift is actually a curse, and I'm too corrupted to recognize it anymore. The person I was would be horrified by what I've become, would beg for death rather than continue this existence. But that person is gone, and I'm all that remains. The demon world of Tertius continues to exist in its liminal state, neither fully real nor fully unreal. Ships occasionally stumble into our space, drawn by warp currents or navigator errors. When they do, we greet them, show them the truth of change. Most flee in terror. Some stay, willingly or otherwise, and join our ever-growing chorus of transformed souls. The Imperium lists Tertius as destroyed, exterminatus, a cautionary tale about the dangers of chaos corruption. They're not entirely wrong. The world they knew is gone, but something new has taken its place, something that defies their rigid categories of existence and non-existence. We are the proof that their universe is not as ordered as they claim, that change is inevitable, that transformation cannot be stopped, only accepted or rejected. I look out across the impossible geometries of our demon world and see beauty in the chaos, see purpose in the constant flux. Every soul here is on their own journey of transformation, discovering what they might become when freed from the limitations of flesh and imperial doctrine. Is it damnation? By the Emperor's standards, certainly, but standards can change. Everything changes. That's the one universal truth Tzeentch has taught us. The changer's laughter echoes through my mind constantly now, not mocking but approving. We are his experiment, his grand design playing out across infinite possibilities. Every choice we make splits reality into new branches. Every mutation opens new potential. We are chaos incarnate, and we are glorious. Dr. Alexis Vorn is dead, long dead. What I am now has no name, or rather, has countless names that shift with each passing moment. I am the transformed, the enlightened, the damned. I am a cautionary tale and a promise of what awaits those who seek knowledge beyond the Emperor's light. I am what happens when Tzeentch's corruption runs its course, and somewhere, deep in what remains of my soul, I'm still screaming, still begging for it to stop, still clinging to the memory of who I was. But the whispers drown out that voice. The colors swallow that last fragment of humanity. The change consumes everything. It always does.